Hey friends, JC here. I'm really excited to share this with you today because I've actually never heard it talked about anywhere, seriously. And it's a big piece of my own well-being toolbox. It's my shortcut to resource that's deeply wired in my nervous system, and the wonderful thing is that we all have them. And I call them resource triggers. This video today is more like a mini class. What I'm sharing here is a different paradigm, so I'm going to explain it and then walk you through an actionable process. So first, I'll offer my unique perspective on triggers as a whole and how they work like superheroes, and then I'll guide you through a process on how you can use their mechanism to trigger the resource you need most in a highly stressful moment. So instead of feeling overwhelmed under pressure, you rise to the occasion with the help of resource triggers. Once I began approaching things this way, my world became a lot more empowering, and I hope by sharing this, it does for you as well. So let's start. What is a trigger? So we hear the term quite a lot. It's gotten into mainstream usage. We might describe a situation as triggering. We may see a trigger warning on a piece of writing, but what actually is a trigger? Here's how I see it. A trigger is a shortcut mechanism in the wiring of a system. It's one piece that initiates a process or a reaction. It's part of the design in a system, in our case, the human nervous system. In my view, a trigger itself is neutral. It's simply a shortcut. Now, you might only be familiar with the shortcut to upset, but those aren't the only shortcuts in our system. So let's start with the ones I'm sure you know, and then we'll get to resource triggers. Okay, if you're a human, you've probably experienced the trigger to upset. In the span of a few moments, everything suddenly feels very high stakes and extraordinarily charged, leading to a sudden reaction. In the actual present moment, you're not under threat or in danger for your life, but it feels that way. Why? The context of the situation plus a signal, something that you see, something that you smell, taste, touch, feel, or hear, perhaps a word that was said, triggers you into an automatic protective reaction that isn't how you choose to act if you had a lot of time to think about it. And the reaction can look different ways. It might be more explosive in nature, it might be more implosive or collapsing, or it might be more disconnecting from a part of yourself, from the other person, from the present moment. And all of these responses are brilliant. We're lucky to have them in the cases that we've needed them or will need them if in danger. Of course, these responses keep us alive, but they don't themselves engender mutually supportive relationships, creative problem solving, collaboration, honest and vulnerable expression, trust, many of the things that we value. Resource triggers can do that, but we'll get to that. In the specific case of triggers to upset, the context of the situation plus the signal tricks the system into believing that the present situation is a past situation because the similarities feel close enough. The level of reaction is disproportionate and non-responsive to the present moment. And my view is that the reaction is in fact proportionate and directly responsive to an old situation. And it's simply stored up from being unresolved. I call these triggers to upset or low resilience triggers. Why? They awaken lower resilience areas of ourselves. At the extremes, we basically become someone in that moment who can only act out of survival. So how we see others, ourselves, and the situation becomes about using a strategy for self-preservation. And there's so much we can do to work with and rewire these, but I won't go into that here because there's a lot of focus on this kind of trigger, nearly exclusive focus from what I've seen. But what's cool is that it's not the only kind of trigger. A trigger is simply a shortcut in the system. Shortcut mechanisms do not only bring about low resilience areas in ourselves, where it's easier to feel upset and be reactive or collapse, despite the actual present day circumstance being different from the past. But shortcut mechanisms also awaken areas of high resilience inside ourselves, where it's easier to feel grounded, centered, supported, connected, also despite present day circumstance. So let's make the analogy very clear. For a low resilience trigger, despite an actual safe moment, a low resilience trigger can bring about upset. So it works the same way when we flip everything to the opposite. Even in a stressful moment, resource triggers can bring about resourcefulness, calm, flexibility, creativity. And a trigger is an adaptive pattern in our wiring, part of the machinery, part of the design. And my personal observation and belief is that every adaptive pattern has a protection-oriented version and a growth-oriented version, which is fantastic news. So, just as low resilience triggers come up without trying to bring them about, so do resource triggers. And if you've seen anything else that I say, I think you know what I'm going to say now, which is, if we're self-observant and proactive, we can purposefully stash our life with more resource triggers. Before we get into specific examples and a process to identify yours, I want to share how triggers work as a mechanism so you can use them effectively. Also, how are trigger mechanisms like superheroes? Picture this. Living deep inside your nervous system are a number of superheroes. Some of them are top-notch, A grade. They span the gamut. Some are C or D grade superheroes, like Batmite, a well-meaning and aide who causes chaos trying to help Batman in a fight. Or Captain Compass, a boat detective who literally only solves boat crimes. The D-level heroes have a limited set of catchphrases that they use, actions that they do, and a very specific way of doing things. The A-level superheroes bring strength, ingenuity, flexibility, and they open up a whole team of support. All of the superheroes have a signal or a call, and when they perceive it, they come to the rescue automatically. Some signals trigger Superman and in effect the whole league and all of their resources, and other signals trigger the boat detective who believes that everything is a boat mystery. So, how do the superheroes know when they've been called? They know when what they perceive, what they see, hear, feel, matches or is close enough to the sights, sounds, sensations of the last time they were called. You can imagine the bat signal, a lighted image of a bat. Or, if you've ever watched Doug, Quailman's call is a whistle. At the backdrop of these signals, there's also a context. The situation seems familiar. Someone's in distress, in the case of a superhero. Basically, their sensory landscape triggers them because it matches another time they believed they were needed and came online. So triggers work by copying the sensory landscape of an old situation. Your nervous system perceives the same senses and concludes that the old scene is occurring right now, and therefore brings the parts of you online that were active then. The signal shortcuts the front of the brain, which houses slower mental processes like planning and reasoning, so the character perceives its signal and springs into action. And in the case of low resilience triggers or D-level superhero triggers, we probably want to work with that wiring, slow it down, give them some resources and assistance. But in the case of resource triggers, this shortcut mechanism is very, very helpful. So, what building blocks create the trigger mechanism? How do we make use of it for resource triggers? And how do we identify our own? There are a few ways I'll describe here, and then I'll walk you through a process to identify your own resource triggers so you can trigger them more often. Okay, there are two core components of the trigger mechanism: the context and the signal. The context is the background or the setting. Essentially, what is going on here? What are the conditions? The signal is a distinct call into your sensory landscape: a sound, a sight, smell, taste, or feeling that comes from touch or movement. To identify and bring about resource triggers for yourself, you can draw from both resource contexts and resource signals. In this video, I'm going to focus on the signals. A resource signal is a sensory experience that shortcuts to resource, and it works immediately because it's deeply wired association. Now, I keep using the word resource. Let me define that. Resource is life fuel, that which provides energy for growth. That's my definition. Examples include foundational resources that we take in, such as air, food, water, sunlight, and they also include human life fuel, such as the sense of ground, dignity, sense of self, sense of belonging, connection, feeling seen, heard, met, feeling supported, empowered, essentially that which brings embodied, relational, and spiritual nourishment and expression. Our low resilience triggers are basically shortcutting us to the opposite, depletion or lack of these, a time or times when these were missed in a really big way. So you may know the words, phrases, images, smells, tastes, or movements that recall you into disconnection or disempowerment. But what about the sensory landscape that recalls you into feeling grounded, centered, supported, connected, and empowered? So let's identify your resource signals, the equivalent of your own bat signal or quail call. Once you know these, you can use them to support yourself on demand at any time, so I highly recommend knowing your own. I'm going to walk you through a process here, 5 parts, where you'll learn which resource signal to use to transform a stressful situation in your life into a nourishing situation. You can then expand from there. So, grab a pen and paper so you really can identify your own. Okay, the first step is to identify a stressful situation that has come up recently where you'd like to feel differently. It could also be a situation that keeps coming up repeatedly. That would work great. And I recommend choosing one that is like a 6 stress level on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most extreme, 1 being nourishing. And choose a specific moment in the past, a specific moment in time of that situation that you can freeze frame. A moment you can freeze frame. Consider it now and pause if you need to. Do you have it? Okay, to identify this, I invite you to picture yourself like a character in a movie inside the situation, and you're watching yourself. Picture where you are, inside, outside. Notice if you're by yourself, with another person, a group. Notice where your attention is. How are you moving or not moving? Notice your body positioning. And also notice, how are you being? How are you being, and what are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? So I'd recommend pausing here and jotting a few notes down to really zoom in and unpack what's going on so that we can identify what you need most to have a different experience. Okay, once you finish that, step 2, identify one quality that is missing from the situation that you believe would make the biggest difference if it were present there. It's the game changer quality. Now, let me give you an example from me and how I'm thinking of this so that you don't just default to a quality that sounds nice, but you actually identify what you specifically need in that situation. That's how this will be helpful. For me, there's a particular brand of stressful moments that come up continuously for me to work with so I can build resources around them. And they look like this. I make a phone call and I speak with a person to explain what I need. I've already identified something that I need, and I need to talk to someone on the phone to get it. And then I find myself in an encounter with someone who I begin to view as an unreasonable gatekeeper, and I perceive them as blocking what I need. Often it's a person who is reading from a script, and it seems like they're not engaging with what I'm saying. And I keep trying through the same channels, possibly for hours. I might think what I need is important, and I'm being blocked for no reason. And all the while, I begin to feel frustrated and eventually start to lose hope. Okay, so what qualities characterize the situation? Persistence, determination, commitment, rigidity, mundaneness, one of the most mundane kinds of situations. What qualities are missing from the situation? The opposite: flexibility, levity, humor, reverence, creativity, wonder, awe. And imagine if I were to lay over a tone filter on the movie scene of the situation and infuse the scene and the characters with one quality, which would be the biggest difference? I pick awe. Imagine a movie scene of me talking to a person in customer service who is reading a script and everything being infused with the quality of awe. That would completely transform my experience of it. Okay, so now you take a moment to pause and identify a few qualities that are missing from your situation that would completely transform it. And then pick one game changer quality. Okay, once you've got that, come back. Step 3 is internalize the quality. So using my example, imagine if I could tap into awe inside myself in that moment. Imagine me in the moment going, wow, I'm communicating with somebody miles away through a wireless signal system that I really don't understand how it works. We're sharing the same time-space experience at a distance. We're sharing the same ground, a ground that is one planet among many, in one galaxy among many. It's incredible and bizarre and fascinating. Like, what a time and a place to be a human. So whatever your quality is, how would you be in this situation if you embodied this quality? How would you show up? What would you be thinking about yourself, about others, about the situation as a whole? So pause for a moment and imagine it as a scene in a movie with yourself amplifying, and broadcasting that quality. Okay. Once you've got that, move to part 4, which is identifying your resource signal. So imagine that this quality is one of your A-grade superheroes inside of you. you've already identified which superhero you need in that situation, and now you just need their signal. There are two ways that I know of to identify that signal. So one, as you consider that quality, whatever you wrote down, can you remember a moment when you really felt that you lived that quality, lived it? Really see if you can find a memory in a specific moment in time. It's somewhere there. It's okay if you can't recall anything in this moment, and there's another way that I'll share to access it too. But if you've got a moment, what brings the essence of that moment to life for you? Is it imagining the place where it was, or hearing someone's voice, or feeling a part of your body moving in a specific way? What is the sensory landscape? If you don't have a memory you can recall at this moment, you can also pick a person, a character, can be a cartoon character, an animal, or you could pick a natural element like the ocean, mountains, sunshine, whatever it is for you that represents that quality to you. Then identify your signal. What brings you the feeling of this quality? Is it an image, a sound, a sensation, smell, taste? So write down a few sensory cues that bring you there, and then identify which one is the strongest. That's your signal. For me, with awe, I picture this moment I had at night when I saw the vastness of the ocean melting with the sky. And then I layer in the sounds, the smells, the sensation of the ocean in that particular scene. So for me, that signal is my picture of the ocean at night. That's the strongest. All right, so now we're at the last piece, step 5, part 5, which is of course the challenge. You know I'm gonna end with a challenge. I used a bunch of words here to explain this concept and why I think it's really awesome, but I would encourage you not to take my word on any of it, but to experiment for yourself and find out. So here's your incredibly simple, not necessarily easy, transformative challenge. Within the next 24 hours, that's one day, identify your next potential stressful situation. It might be something that you've been avoiding, and bring your resource signal to it. Write it down. So for me, it could be image of ocean, or I could have a picture of it, or sensation of dancing in community. And then, so that you've written down your resource signal, and then use it in the moment. Keep pressing that button, keep using it, light up that bat signal, and then see if that A-level superhero inside of you comes alive. Let's go.